The International Labor Organization suggests there may be 40.3 million men, women, and children in some form of slavery today. The majority of that, I think around 60%, is in forced labor. So think about sweatshop labor, bonded servitude, indentured servitude. Yes, in Asia and Africa, but let's not kid ourselves. California, a lot of the agriculture areas, Texas, where I live.
Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. Men's Alliance is a growing movement of tribes across the nation that meet weekly for rugged outdoor workouts and a real-world devotion around a fire. If you want to be a part of what we're doing, join us at men'salliancetribe.com, where you can find a tribe near you or come to one of our Start the Fire weekends. So check us out at men'salliancetribe.com. Now stay tuned for this great podcast. Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. I'm Dave Goose Mills, and I'm here today with Matt Osborne. Really excited about having this conversation. Matt and I haven't got a chance to talk yet, so this is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it, and I know you guys are going to enjoy it as well. So Matt has been fighting sex trafficking in some form or another since 2006, and he currently is with an organization called Operation Underground that he's going to tell us about today. Before that, Matt is he was in the CIA for 12 years, worked with the State Department, done all kinds of stuff in this field of combating terrorism and sex trafficking all over the world in many different countries. So, Matt, welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. It's great to have you.
Well, Dave, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this for a while and can't wait to get into the discussion.
Cool. Why don't you just start off, just tell us a little bit about Operation Underground, what this organization does.
Yeah, absolutely. So Operation Underground Railroad, a nonprofit underground railroad, we're big fans of history and those heroes of the Civil War movement, right? The Underground Railroad helping slaves from the South to the North. Unfortunately, too many of us, including me back in the day, thought that slavery ended with Abraham Lincoln. I did not realize there were perhaps more slaves today than at any time in human history, into forced labor conditions, but also commercial sexual exploitation, forced prostitution, and that's what Operation Underground Railroad does. We've been around about 10 years, and what we do is empower law enforcement. We started overseas where we provided funding, different tools that they needed, but we also provided the American face. Unfortunately, it's American men in many respects, and then Western men, Canadians and Germans, Brits, who are causing this sort of child sex tourism. They're creating this, and we can get into this during your show. And that's why I love what you're doing, right? Man, we have to actually take the lead in this fight. So overseas, we go undercover. We always go with the permission of the host government. We're not a vigilante group. We're made up of people like you and other men in your audience, former military. Thank you, Dave, for your service. Former special operations. Again, I was CIA, Department of State, those who can handle themselves overseas. And we play the role of the middleman. We set up the deals with the traffickers. They believe they're bringing kids to a sex party. I know it sounds gross, right, and terrible, but this happens every single day. And then we set up the operations, have the arrests. We get arrested too, at least in the initial part, so the traffickers don't know what's going on. And then we get the kids back to their parents, back to families, or into vetted aftercare homes. Then we expanded into the U.S., where we don't do the undercover in the U.S. We work behind the scenes, funding, training, tools, technology, provide aftercare, and raise awareness. And maybe we can talk about, I don't know if you saw or anyone in your audience saw the movie Sound of Freedom this last summer, or now it's been on Amazon Prime. That's the founding story of our organization. How can we help the men and women on the front lines do even more? So that's just a little thumbnail then of what we do at Operation Underground Railroad in our nonprofit.
And that is incredible. Yeah, I did see that movie last year. So powerful, just unbelievable. It seems like this is like starting to become more of a conversation, right? Like, I remember. I mean, I don't know what year it was. Probably around I feel like maybe 06, 07, maybe around there, when I was in the Air Force when they first started requiring us to take this annual online training uh, called Combating Trafficking in Persons. And that was the
Yep.
first
Yep.
time like I had ever heard that phrase and anybody around me had, and we were all like, what is this? And we start taking this training. Of course, I took it, nearly 20 times. And it starts like, okay, this is what to look for. This is what's going on. And I know right off the bat for me, and again, this is, nearly 20 years ago, I was thinking, is this really a big problem? Or is this just another online course that the DoD is making us
Right.
take? And of course, now over
Check the
these
box,
years,
right? Is this just a check the box?
yeah, with that movie, Sound of Freedom, this is gaining so much more um, attention. So is this something that is it gaining all this attention because we're just now hearing about it, or is it really getting worse? What's going on? Why is this becoming such a topic now, it seems?
Yeah, it's definitely getting worse, and I'll talk about it in a sec. But it's interesting to talk about 2006, and I think you're probably right because that's when a lot of this sensitivity training started coming out. The laws in the U.S. changed in the early 2000s to allow law enforcement to be proactive, to go after suspected pedophiles and traffickers.
Mm,
In the past, if you could believe that the laws were such where law enforcement sort of had to just stay there with their arms crossed, waiting for a victim to say, hey, I was raped, I was assaulted, I was trafficked. Now, Homeland Security investigations, the FBI and others could take the lead. And that was and again, like I said, 2004, 2005. Then they looked at the military. All right, the military are men and women, right? The leaders. However, they wanted to educate military that, hey, you go into a port of call in the Philippines, Thailand, right? Africa, Europe, and you get a 48-hour pass, a 72-hour pass. Yeah, you go to the bar and have some beers, but hey, let's go to the strip club. Let's go get some prostitutes. Trying to educate the aspect of trafficking in that. I use myself as an example, and maybe some in your audience are the same. I thought it was like the movie Pretty Woman. You remember that back in the day, the Julia
oh
Roberts
God,
character,
yeah,
right? I mean, well, what lies were told about that? Remember that character? She made it seem like I decide when and with who and how much I can charge, and I get all the money. Dave, as you
oh yeah,
know,
very
like that doesn't happen.
very empowering for a woman to become a prostitute, right? Gosh,
Absolutely. And
what a
again,
lie.
right, for sure. And so we talk about that it's not Pretty Woman and it's not Taken with Liam Neeson, right? Somewhere in between. So your question to is it getting worse? I think it absolutely is getting worse. And this is what I love what the Men's Alliance is talking about. Good Christian men. We need to take the lead because of the ties to pornography, and we can get into that if you want in the show, how it all sort of leads into
Absolutely,
pornography addictions.
yeah.
I've heard podcasts with you before. You talk about destroying marriages, other things. If guys don't have something positive to turn to, they turn to negative, like pornography, and you talked about that. Well, the COVID pandemic, the lockdowns, think about that 18 months, 2 years, men mostly at home with laptops and phones. What are they doing? Probably looking at pornography. So afterwards, when there were vaccines and they were able to travel, we saw an explosion of child sex tourists going overseas. So long way of
Mm,
answering your question. It's getting worse because of pornography, internet pornography, and an over sexualization of our culture, over objectification of women. And that's what I love that good men can rally and, not being part of the problem. That's just the floor, isn't it? Right. And you always say we got to be part of the solution. So I'm
yeah,
optimistic. I know it's a huge bit, isn't it? Business, huge industry. We're not going to solve it overnight, but shows like this and rallying, because if we can end the demand, can you imagine that? If the demand goes away, there wouldn't be the trafficking. But unfortunately, too many of us men are out there thinking it's an even trade. I want her body, she wants my money, no harm, no foul. That's not really what's happening.
wow. Yeah, I definitely want to get into both the the source of pornography as a fuel for this industry as well as what we can do about it. But can you give us an idea of maybe like the scope of this problem? How what like numbers wise or whatever, like how bad is this?
Yeah, I'll give you some stats that I don't know if they're true or not. It's the stats are all over the board, but then I'll give you personal anecdotes that hopefully will show the extent of how vast this is. The International Labor Organization suggests there may be 40.3 million 40.3 million men, women, and children in some form of slavery today. The majority of that, I think around 60%, is in forced labor. So think about sweatshop labor, bonded servitude, indentured servitude. Yes, in Asia and Africa, but let's not kid ourselves. California, a lot of the agriculture areas, Texas, where I live, I know you studied here, Arlington, right? We have some Texas ties. Let's not
Yeah,
kid
that's
ourselves. It
right.
exists in different areas.
Go
So it could
Mavericks.
be just, yeah, exactly. Well, hoping they turn it around here a little bit. But, you know, the slave labor, essentially. Then about 40% commercial sexual exploitation. United Nations says around 23 million slaves. State Department says about 27 million. UNICEF says maybe between 2 and 5 million are children. Is that true? Goose, I don't know. But here's what I know. On 21 different occasions with Operation Underground Railroad over the past 10 years, I've led undercover operations to various countries. Think Mexico, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Peru, Thailand. 21 times we go as guys like you and me, hanging out, going to the beaches. Maybe we do go to the bars. Maybe we go to tourist areas. Not once, Dave, have I not been offered children. Now, it doesn't happen right away. And maybe you
Mm.
and others in your audience can remember, right? If the last time you've been on vacation on a beach, has anyone come up to you and said, hey, you want to buy a shell necklace? Hey, you want some beer? You want drugs? You want girls? Right? That's kind of how they start. And that middleman, he's not really the trafficker. He knows how to get you everything from a whale watching cruise to girls. But if you're able, like our undercover operators, we don't entrap, we don't provoke, we don't even bring up kids. We say, what do you have? Oh, I've got all types of girls. After a while, if you ask the right questions, they then introduce you to their boss or their boss's boss who says, oh, I've got 20-year-old girls. I've got 18. Hey, man, I've got 13, 14. I mean, it's crazy. So does that make sense? I don't know what the statistics are, but on 21 different times, not once have they said, oh, yeah, we don't have girls or we only have 21 and up. Nope. It's just crazy.
Wow, man. You said 40 million is the estimated number of slaves currently. I just typed in a Google search here because I was curious about this answer. I just typed in how many slaves did Abraham Lincoln free during the Emancipation Proclamation. It says more than 3 million. I just wanted a number to put that into context for like how many slaves were there in America, in the 1860s, a little over
Right.
3 million. And now you're saying like now there's over 40 million slaves. And
Yeah.
man, that's incredible. Just your personal story about never not having a time when a child wasn't offered. That's just incredible right there. And I think that speaks volumes. I remember like one of the things going back to that, annual training in the military, one of the things they told us to always be on the lookout was, people who don't have any of their own papers. And, when you think about that for everybody who's traveled a lot abroad, man, that's like somebody taking your papers is like them, chaining a ball and chain to you. Like
Right.
you can't go anywhere until they give those back to you. They've got you. And you go into another country where you don't speak the language, maybe that you've been promised a good job in construction. So you go there, and then when you get there, you don't speak that local language. Maybe it's a different place than you thought you were going and that you signed up for, and then they hold on to all your paperwork, put you in a a dorm, a barracks, a trailer with 100
Right.
other guys, and you got to start working every day. They're keeping half your money. They've got your paperwork. To me, when I started learning a lot of that, it started clicking together. It's like, oh, that's what slavery looks like. That's how
Mm-hmm.
they get you, right. They're not, it doesn't look like the 1860s. Um, they're not capturing you and putting you, necessarily all the time on a ship, although I'm sure that happens. But sometimes it's just the promise of a job that you sign up
Exactly.
for, you go, and then it's a different place. You were lied to. It's different pay. They've got your papers. You're powerless. If you can't speak the language, you have no means of transportation, no cash, and no papers. What are you going to do? Who are you going to go to? Who are you going to tell this story to that's even going to understand you, much less believe you? You are just
Right.
totally at their mercy. And for me, that was a big part of understanding. Oh man. And you think about it, if that's how they can get strong grown men into forced slave labor, building roads, building, buildings, um, it would work the exact same way for women and
Mm-hmm.
children in sex slavery. So I think, understanding kind of a little bit of like, man, how does that happen? Like, how are these 40 million slaves getting taken? I
Right.
think sometimes it helps our just to understand, man, it's, yeah, like you said, it's not like the movie Taken all the time. It's more like being, kind of lied to, duped, coerced. And obviously you've got to go after somebody who's vulnerable in the first place, who needs work, who needs money, who has people that they're trying to support and take care of. Man, so this is just incredible. Like hearing the scope of this 40 million. So let's talk a little bit about the root cause and what's
Mm-hmm.
fueling this.
Yeah. And so we'll focus first on the victim side and then on the demand side. Overseas, and
Okay.
this is a generalization, but overseas trafficking is poverty driven, where in the US it's drug driven, right? And I'll say this,
Okay.
overseas, you have a lot more poverty. You have a lot more of the susceptibility of a smooth talking trafficker coming in and offering a single mom $500, $1,000 for her best looking daughter to be a model, to be an au pair girl overseas, to have some sort of, to become a star. You remember in Sound of Freedom, the beginning when the woman offered that girl a modeling job. You remember? Well,
Yeah.
that's not too far fetched. We worked with in Colombia. There was a girl, and I sat in on the meetings with her where she had participated in a local beauty pageant, had gotten some fame, and she used her fame to recruit girls into the network
Mm.
overseas, or sorry, in the United States, unfortunately, with our drug problem, right? The opioids, the fentanyl, so all of that, the marijuana, the cocaine. A lot of girls from normally good homes or sometimes runaways, but definitely not poverty as we think. It's oftentimes to feed a drug habit. And so that's again generalizations. But what it is, and you just said it, girl, it's vulnerabilities. Everyone has a vulnerability. You have a vulnerability. I have a vulnerability. I've heard you in the past. We as men have vulnerabilities. But speaking about trafficking, girls mostly, but also boys. In our experience, it's about 75-80% trafficking victims are girls and women, 20-25% boys and men. But we'll say right now, girls and women. There's a vulnerability. Do they need food? It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Do they need food, clothing, shelter? Do they need love? Do they need a sense of belonging? Do they need to be told they're beautiful? I use my daughters as example. So I have two college age daughters now, one at TCU in Fort Worth and one at University of Tennessee. If anyone could see the gray hair in my sideburns, right? That's from raising two girls. We love them, but boy, they put us through a lot, don't they?
Oh
Well,
yeah.
they, I believe, have had a great childhood, a great youth. My wife and I, we've been married for 26 years. We've tried to give them everything. But I tell you, one or both of my daughters may very well have been or still be susceptible for someone to say, hey, I can make you a YouTube star. I can make you an influencer. I can make you money.
Mm.
You're so beautiful. Does that make sense? That's a vulnerability as well that
Yeah.
people can pry on. And what I love too about what you're trying to do, and this is why I want to bring it home, we say there are three legs of the stool in this trafficking issue. There's the victim herself, mostly we'll say. Then there's the trafficker, one who's making a business decision because he mostly, but there are also a lot of female traffickers, for years, this has been a low risk, high reward business proposition. High reward because you remember the movie, Jim Caviezel, that character said, how many times can you sell a bag of cocaine? One time. How many
Oh
times can you
yeah.
sell a human being over and over again? So they're profiting off of that. High reward. Low risk because for the most part, law enforcement's not going after them or they don't think they will be captured. So they're working with impunity. So that's a trafficker. But what's that third leg of the stool? The buyer, the John, as we say. That's what they're called. Apologies to all those in your audience named John, right? But that's what they say. These are the Johns. And that's where I hope we can focus because that's the demand side. That's who's fueling it. That's who's paying the money. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's this cycle, the three legs of the stool, and you have to deal with each of them in different ways. And what we're trying to do at Operation Underground Railroad, first and foremost, is go after the trafficker, make the arrest, then rescue, help with the victim and survivor. And now through shows like this, we can then talk about the demand side. Men in the audience, we've got to rally each other to make sure not only do we never purchase sex, do we never abuse an individual, but we rally our guys as well and our buddies to know that, again, this is trafficking. It's not prostitution, not Pretty Woman. These are victims. These aren't volunteers who, as you were saying earlier, empowering. This isn't someone who grew up wanting to be a prostitute and a sex worker. Something bad happened to her in her life, or many bad things that led her to be into this industry.
Yeah. Oh man. So many kind of like emotions just going on, just talking about this with you. Um, you brought up that movie Pretty Woman. I hadn't even thought about that, but man, just think about like just what an incredible lie that 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 movie kind of like planted a seed in people's mind of like what prostitution would look like,
Yep.
as being like a viable option for employment. I can't imagine that there's any women that actually are choosing it when if they have any other option available. Like you talk about an absolute last resort, that's only
Mm-hmm.
used, when somebody is absolutely, uh, at their last thread of trying to put food on the table for their kids or something. Um,
Right.
wow.
And Goose, what you're saying is great. And what I think is was we as men have to realize, and this is, I'm the first one pointing my finger at myself. I'm 52 years old now. 30 years ago, more or less, I went to some bachelor parties in my 20s. I went to strip clubs. I didn't know. If I would have known, I never would have gone. I can't change the past, but I can change the future. But too many people think, well, these women are of age. They went into the strip club or they are working the streets. They signed up. Well, maybe, maybe not. But even if they quote unquote signed up, it's what you just said. They see that as their last resort. Something bad happened to them, many bad things. Did their stepfather rape them and abuse them? Did they get kicked out of the house? Did their mom sell them? Were they hooked on drugs? Did something happen? And again, I use my two daughters, and I'm not judging anyone who's in those industries, right? I wish that there wasn't a demand for that. But I use my two daughters, maybe others in your audience who have daughters. How many daughters, when they were 5, 6, 7 years old, putting on mom's high heels, the purse, that said, when I grow up, I want to be a prostitute. I want to be a sex worker. That's just not something on their radar. Why would they put themselves in that situation to risk abuse and drug addiction and disease and all of these things? And I just, again, respecting the individual always, but not liking the industry. I fault the traffickers, the bar owners, those who are exploiting. And then I want to rally to make sure that all of us men in society can one day realize, oh, that's not cool. I'm not going to go contribute to that business, whether it's going to a strip club, whether it's buying a prostitute or an escort, or whether it's looking at pornography. Again, not judging, right? There's no halo over my head. It's like, this is what I've learned over the years. And now I want to share that as much as possible with anyone willing to listen and join the fight.
Man, yeah, it's really cool that you just said that. Um, I actually, our podcast that just came out this morning is me sharing my story about all my past failures. Not even all of them. There's too many to put in a podcast, but some of them.
Same
And
here. Same here.
and I think that that's an important thing to talk about as well because yeah, I've done all these bad things, and now I know better, and now I've repented from that, and I hate that, and I think that an important part of this story is how Satan uses our past to try to keep us silent now. We feel disqualified to speak up. We're like, man, who am
Yep.
I to say anything? Um, I've been that guy. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to kind of get over that lie, get over ourselves, and get off the sideline, get back in the game and be like, yeah, I did, but now I know better, and now I want to make a difference and change
Absolutely.
things. And so, I think to the men listening that feel like, well, I don't want to be a hypocrite, right? That's such a hair triggered label that the world wants to put on us. If you were ever bad, and now you want to do something good, you're a hypocrite. Be quiet. Well, hold on a second. We've all done bad things, right? So does that mean none of us are
Hmm.
supposed to ever try to do anything good now? Um,
Right.
so I think it should be even more of a reason why we ought to try to do things right. Um,
Hmm.
is because we've been bad. Now we should try even harder to kind of turn things around and leave a positive impact in this world. So I think so much of this is, guys, we've just got to hear that message over and over. Like, listen, yeah, I get it. We've all screwed up. That doesn't mean you can't make a difference now. So, kind of
Correct.
with that being said, what would you say to just the average guy in this country listening to this, who totally agrees with this message and they're like, yeah, this is terrible. I agree. But what can I do? What can I, do on a daily basis or annual basis? What can I really do? How can I really affect a positive change here?
Yeah, and I just have been looking forward to meeting you, to chatting with you, because I know that you're rallying good men, good Christian men, who are all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But we can't change the past. We can change the future, and we can change the present. So what I always say is concentric circles, meaning start with yourself, look inward, right? I'm the same as you. Too many faults to even talk about. But in the Bible, it talks about clean your inner vessel. So I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh, is there a little spot here, a little spot here? That spot could be anything from greed and avarice to lust to pornography to not treating our wives and our kids with the respect they need because we focus too much on our job or college football. I mean, I'm a big sports fan, right? And different things in balance. But specifically to what we're talking about here, I would reach out now to all the men and think about, what do you have in your mind? Thoughts on lust, thoughts on pornography, thoughts on even the over sexuality of our culture. And again, I'm not an old fuddy duddy, right? I mean, TV's, movies, but look at how that slippery slope has gone from when our parents and grandparents would see I Love Lucy, and they had the two single beds there. And then,
Separate
you'd
beds,
see a
yeah.
little bit of separate beds, right? And then now what they show on TV, and what I'm most worried about are our young men, and then, of course, all of us in general. So let's, if we can, just dive in a little bit to pornography. Um,
Yeah.
Pornography is so addicting today. And I use myself as an example. And what you just mentioned, it's men like us who failed. It's men like us who have had experiences, in my case, where 20, 30 years ago, right? And even, let's be honest, even probably 10, 15 years ago. So I use this example with me, and maybe some of your audience can relate. 52 years old, as I mentioned. Goose, I can't remember what I had for lunch the day before yesterday, right? Without thinking. I honestly, but right now, I can close my eyes and I can see the images in the first Playboy magazine that I saw when I was in fifth grade. I kid you not. I mean, I see those pictures. And that was just images on a screen. Nowadays, cell phones, it's in your face, it's video, it's audio, it's homophobic, it's racist, it's misogynistic, it's really fetish, it's so crazy. And you're just a Google, you know, phrase away from getting some of the most horrible things.
Hmm.
And the way the human mind works, it's the same with drugs, it's the same with other things. When you're looking for that dopamine hit, right? And you're looking for that pleasure, after a while, just looking at a Playboy magazine isn't enough. Now it's got to be a video. All of a sudden, it's got to be something more intense. After a while, just watching two adults on a screen, that's not enough. And again, it's a slippery slope. None of us know who has the addicting gene or not, the addicted gene or not. Some people can watch it, no problem. Some people look at it once and all of a sudden they've got to go out and be with a woman or be with the boy or whatever it is. So I think if we recognize that for what it is, the quicker we can get that garbage out of our head. And then if we have a problem, and I think one of your podcasts, if I remember one of your subjects, it's okay to ask for help. Men can ask for help. If you think you have a problem, ask for help. There are amazing resources out there to help. But if this problem is left unchecked, it will end up in a failed marriage. you lose your kids, your job, your house, or you end up in jail because you've gone and purchased a human for sex, which in Texas now, you may know, is a felony. They finally made it a felony for the purchaser, and they're doing it in other states. So I know that's a long-winded answer, and we can talk more about that. But just as men, to rally us to recognize this for what it is, and to rally the guys in our group, that there's healthy masculinity. And I know that's what you're promoting around the fire and the workouts. And I love to work out, but I'm a little scared about burpees on gravel. I think I got to join you for one of these burpees on gravel. Toughen up. But I think that's healthy masculinity. Talking around the fire is healthy masculinity. But let's not, think that locker room talk in the bad way, that that's healthy masculinity. Some of us grew up with fathers and grandfathers who would call girls the B word and this word and this word. I was guilty of that too. But let's rally good men to call each other on that. And I don't know your thoughts as well.
Oh man, 100% agree. I think since you just happened to bring that up, that's a word that just like no man should ever have in his vocabulary. It's just
Yep.
get that word. It doesn't matter what the context is. Don't let that word take seed and grow in your mind
But
in
it's so
any
much part of our
context.
society, isn't it? Think of movies, think of
Yeah,
TV, think of rap music, think of I mean, it's just, and yet, and so what if some little boy hears that? All of a sudden, they'll think they must be bees. They must be that word. They must be. And that's why we're doing it. Words mean things, it's not
yeah.
harmless. So I love what you're saying. Let's just get that word out of our vocabulary.
Men, are you looking to buy a new home? Maybe it's a vacation home, maybe a rental property, or maybe it's building your dream home, and you need a mortgage. Well, I want to tell you about a tribesman who can help you with just that. Chris Norwood, call sign Coop from Hammer Tribe. He works at Town Bank Mortgage. He has been doing this for over 21 years. He's qualified to lend in 16 states. He can definitely help you out. Let me give you his contact info. You can go to townbankmortgage.com/Chris Norwood, or you can call him directly at 804-439-3206. Again, this is Chris Norwood, call sign Coop. He's a Men's Alliance guy from Town Bank Mortgage who can help get you a loan for your dream home. He even helped Iron buy his new house. Check him out. In any war in history, I studied this for a master's degree when I was in the Air Force, the dehumanization of enemies. And you look at like in any war in history, one of the first things that's always done is you have to come up with a name for your enemy that will dehumanize them, something that we can say they are, because it begins the mind to start making it more acceptable to kill this person because they're not a real human. They're a slang word. And that's like the first step is you dehumanize through the word you use to refer to them. Uh, think back through. I know we can all. I don't need to rattle them off here, but we can just picture any World War II movie. What are they calling the enemy? That's an
Yep.
important step in dehumanizing. And to your point about how we're dehumanizing, it's no longer an enemy; it's just a victim, right? That we
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to categorize in our brain and pretend that that is not a person, that's not a child of God, um, you
Right.
know, who has parents, um, and so it's okay for us to use that person in some way. So I think there's a tremendous, um, you know, kind of like a line in the sand there about the word we use. Just take even the abortion debate, right? The first thing you've got to do is you got to stop calling it a baby. We got to come up with a
Yep.
new word to make it easier to do what we want with. Oh, let's call it a fetus.
Yep.
It's
Fine
so
fiber
important, the
tissue
words.
mass. It's nothing. It's not a
Yeah,
baby.
you can't call it a
Yeah.
baby. We got to call it something else. And the same thing is so true when it comes to, sex trafficking, abuse, sexploitation, human trafficking, slavery, all these things. Just look at slavery in America. in the 18th, 19th century, of course, they had to pretend that they weren't fully human, because if you
Right.
start acknowledging that this person's fully human, you're going to feel convicted and you won't be able to continue your lifestyle. You were talking about still being able to remember images from decades ago. So I'm sure you're aware of this. There's a Harvard study done on comparing crack cocaine to pornography in their addictiveness. And
Right.
no surprise, pornography is more addictive than crack cocaine
Mm-hmm.
for the very reason that you just said, because the study revealed that over time, crack cocaine will leave your system.
Right.
There is no amount of time for which images we've seen that are pornographic will leave our minds. So they are stuck there. They're always there. Even when we think they're not, sometimes they come back. And you think about it. So then the most addictive drug, pornography, more addictive than crack cocaine. It's free. It's
Mm-hmm.
anonymous, and it's in your pocket, right? So
I'll go
can you
one step
imagine?
further. You can tailor it to whatever you want. And again, I don't want to. I don't. Please
Mhm.
don't try me on this, audience. But you can Google and tailor the craziest fetish and say the word porn, and it's there. So I'll go one step further. Isn't that just unbelievable? I really think
Yeah,
this is Satan's greatest weapon. Greatest meaning strongest, most powerful. Yeah, drugs are bad. Yeah, pride, all that. But pornography, I agree with what you're saying.
I totally agree with you. And again, like everything, it takes something good. It takes something that God created for good, and it
Yep.
twists it for evil. So, it's playing on the way we're designed anyway. We're already designed
Mm-hmm.
to be attracted to
Mm-hmm.
the woman's body, and it's taking it and it's twisting it in a way to pervert it. And then, of course, we're all struggling with it. Of course, men are struggling with it. It's what we were designed to be attracted to, and it's more addictive than crack, and it's free, and it's customizable, and it's anonymous, and it's in our pockets. So I'll just tell you guys this. Um, you cannot, I can hand anybody my phone, picture of my wife on it. I can hand anybody my phone. They can't look at pornography on it. It's not possible unless they know some sort of hack that nobody else is aware of. I can't even access it on there.
Yeah.
And if I handed you my phone, you couldn't either, because I actually have a passcode to even I can't even download an app. I've got a buddy of mine, I've got a wingman who he knows the code, and I don't. And I don't want to know the code. And if I need an app updated, I'll hand him my phone and say, "Hey, I need to get whatever, my Ring doorbell
Wow.
updated." And he leads a class called More Than Conquerors, helping men, and he challenges all of them to do the same thing. Like, listen, it's not about keeping Dave Mills from being able to see pornography. It's about keeping pornography from getting to Dave Mills. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a grown man. If I wanted to figure out a way to go get it, I could go buy a new phone. I could go do whatever I wanted to do to get it if I wanted to. It's about keeping it from me. And I think the more
Wow.
kind of barriers we can put in our life, I feel more relaxed. I like knowing that I'm not walking around with the accessibility of pornography in my pocket. I like knowing that it can't get to me. I like knowing that I've put up a guardrail between it and me. And I say that, and I've never said that before on here, but I say that to highlight the fact that you don't win a war fighting it with one hand behind your back. You
Mm-hmm.
don't you don't go in, think about if you ever play football, you don't tackle somebody going in lightly. Man, you better commit. You better go
Hmm.
all in on that tackle, or else you're going to get crushed. And you don't win a war at a national level. You don't win a war by just sending in, the Navy or just
Right.
sending in the Army. No, you use everything you've got. You throw Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines at them all at once. And men, if we're serious about, this topic of combating human sex trafficking, then you go all in on that, right? You don't just be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, you know, donate $20 a month to this organization and call it good. No, do that and do every other thing you can think of as well. Like go all in on this. So, um, tell you what, that was a rant that I didn't plan on giving, uh, but we'll bringing this back to you guys and to Operation Underground. Um, I'm very curious if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your story. How did you get into this? How did you come to dedicate your life to this cause?
I tell you, if you would have mentioned it to me, as I said, when I was in my 20s, I would have said, first of all, what's human trafficking? I was 12 years with the CIA and U.S. Department of State, as you mentioned at the outset. I got into the CIA because I fell in love with the James Bond movies, Jason Bourne movies. I thought I was cool like that. No, 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 they're really cool. I'm not, but it was interesting what I did. So I joined in 2002. So after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. I worked on Islamist extremist terrorism, worked on defense against the homeland, looking at threats, because you remember back then, we thought the next threat and attack was coming the next day, the next week, the next month. Then after that, with the war in Iraq, after the fall of Saddam, I helped a little bit with fighting the insurgency, trying to help with the political reconstruction in Iraq. I didn't speak Arabic, and I wasn't. I had two young daughters at the time. My wife, I couldn't take them to the Middle East. So I looked for a job where it was a good place to live, but where the account was interesting, the topics were interesting. I was fortunate to get on with the embassy in Madrid, Spain, where you focused on terrorism, organized crime, drug trafficking, and this thing I had never heard of called human trafficking, as I mentioned, in the year 2006, precisely. So '06 to '08, I'm in Spain, love the place, wonderful to work. My daughters learned fluent Spanish. I was jealous because Mr. Gringo here's struggling with Spanish, and these girls just picked it up. Then I went to Venezuela for a while, and you can imagine back then it was the government of Hugo Chavez threatening U.S. interests, threatening war with Colombia. How do we undermine his government? And then 3 years in Mexico City, so fighting the drug trade, the drug war, looking at Mexican institutions. Were any of them non corrupt? Were any of them willing to work with us? And then I started working again in human trafficking there, writing the trafficking in persons report. Well, then someone I had met back in graduate school in the year 2000, Tim Ballard, who was a former Homeland Security Special Agent, he let me know about this organization he was starting up. So, again, Operation Underground Railroad. It was going to be a tip of our cap to the heroes of the Underground Railroad movement in the 1800s, but we were going to launch operations. I will admit, Goose, that I was a little bit nervous because here Uncle Sam was paying me faithfully twice a month. You remember, right? The Air Force, you never had to worry about that paycheck for the most part, healthcare. And Tim was asking me to join an organization where I only get paid if the donations came in. So it was a lot of praying, a lot of soul searching. But I really felt God was putting this on my heart to do this. You had learned these skills in the CIA, Matt. I think he was telling me, I felt he was telling me, now you need to go help rescue my precious children. And I remember reading the Bible, and it struck me that I love the Bible. Anything that's written in the Bible once, I think is important. Anything twice, pretty important. If it's three or more times, you pay attention. And as you know, in three of the four Gospels, Christ is recorded as saying essentially, and I'll paraphrase, it would be better for him that a millstone be put around his neck and he be cast in the middle of the deepest ocean than for him to cause one of these children to stumble or sin. That's what traffickers are doing. And not to be sacrilegious, but I love you and the Christian man. You got to have a sense of humor. I think I remember in the Bible Christ only getting mad twice. One was, of course, when he knocked over the money changing tables in the temple. I think this was the second time. He went a little bit gangster, didn't he? It would be better for him that 1,000-pound stone be put around your neck and you be drowned than doing what you're doing. So that really convicted me a little bit that regardless of what I do the rest of my life, I need to try and go after these people who are causing these children to sin. So it's been a crazy ride. I've been with Operation Underground Railroad for 10 years now almost, have done everything from leading the undercover operations to helping with aftercare. But that's a young man's job, young woman's job. Fortunately, I don't have to be in Satan's lair anymore. It's been a few years since I've been out. This is much better here talking to good guys like you about this because it's a dirty business when you're sitting around across the table from someone who has this little child of God next to him, and he's just casually saying, it weighs this much, it costs this much, it'll do this much, like if it's a piece of meat. And again, I know that this job's important, we have to do it, but I much prefer now being out of that darkness.
Oh man, I tell you, the most horrific stories I've ever heard in my life were told to me by by cops who had done undercover work. Um,
Yeah,
my goodness. I told my boys as they were growing up, and they would every now and then say they wanted to be police. I'd say like, you need to go listen to my buddies' stories. I don't think you want to be undercover. Undercover is not what it looks like in the movies, and you're going to sit there
right.
across the table from those guys and not stop them, not blow your cover. Um, and my hat's off to those guys because they're doing the Lord's work and they're doing a phenomenal job of it. But we're not all cut out for that. I'd blow my cover in like the first second. Um, so I want to talk for just a second here about your website. So it's ourrescue.org. Our is OUR, which is Operation Underground Railroad. So OUR rescue.org. And if you just type in a Google search Operation Underground Railroad, you'll find it as well. So Matt, I know we've got a lot of guys that are going to hear this and feel as passionate about your cause as I do and you do, and they're going to want to support you guys. And I highly encourage that. But I'm going to ask you a crazy question here too. We've also got a lot of guys that are going to be listening to this with backgrounds in law
Right.
enforcement, military, and some agencies. Do you ever need guys to volunteer, or is it just financial support?
No, thank you very much. Yes, the website has all the information, ourrescue.org, ourrescue.org, as Goose just said. And so essentially, we're looking for everything. Yes, if you can donate $5 a month, $25 a month, it all works. Can you pray for us? I mean, you imagine we're going into the darkest layers, corrupt officials. Where do we work? And then what you said, we're always looking for people with a certain set of skills, right? To paraphrase Liam Neeson, men and women, but talking to the men in the audience, we're not always hiring. However, we always want to know you're out there. So you can either go to the website and there's a place you can say, I think it says join the team or join the fight. Tell us about your skills, any language skills, any overseas skills, your military. And what we do is we put you in our operator database. We obviously can't promise, hey, it'll be full time, part time, contractor, or when it will happen. But God works in mysterious ways, doesn't He? And it's amazing to see how many people we get into our database, and then one week we get a call from Thailand, or we need someone who can speak Thai or who's been over in Southeast Asia. Or we get called from one of our Latin American countries who say, we need a certain aspect of a guy, tall or whatever, to play a businessman. Or we need security. Because remember, we play the roles of the middleman. We're negotiating these deals for essentially these rich Americans who are coming in. Well, the rich American would come in and he's going to travel with his security because we can't carry firearms or weapons in the country. So we're oftentimes looking for people who've been special forces, who've been overseas. So does that make sense? We want to know you're out there. We
Absolutely.
absolutely love the support. And again, we're just looking for good, God fearing people who are coming in and want to do something. But I'm like you, for the first while, I said, I can't do this job because I just want to come across the table and strangle them. I would also say to guys, you got to be cool because we want to take them down right there, street justice. However, you got to
Yeah,
play by the rules of the government because if we do it correctly, we can not only take down that trafficker, we can take apart networks of traffickers and save many kids and adults.
man, that is so awesome. And we're putting that website here in the show notes. You can check that out. Click on that. And guys, I want to encourage you to support Operation Underground Railroad, right? Whether it's through prayer, through dollars, or through volunteering, I think this would be a great cause for our Men's Alliance tribesmen to get into. Of course, there's so many different things that we can do to make a difference, and I'm a huge believer that God puts things in our hearts that are unique, and believe it or not, whatever it is you're drawn to, not every guy is drawn to that. So if you are drawn to getting involved and helping out with this organization, realize like, well, maybe that's what God has designed me to do. Maybe that's a unique calling. So pay attention to that and listen to it. So Matt, man, thank you so much for your time, for your ministry, for everything that you're doing. This has been absolutely amazing getting to chat with you. Love to have you on the podcast again, and we can go in a different direction, go a little bit deeper, and just do some follow up with you. So thanks again. Let's keep this relationship going.
Thanks, Goose. I appreciate you and everyone in the Men's Alliance. It's true that life is better in a tribe, and I just am grateful for all you're doing.
Thanks for listening to the Men's Alliance podcast. We hope to see you in one of our tribes or at one of our unforgettable weekend experiences. So join us at men'salliancetribe.com.